At both ends.
Okay, are they all done now?
That's it.
All right.
Happy birthday.
80th birthday.
Now you make a wish and then you blow out the candles.
Oh, I have to delegate someone to blow out the candle. I think Anna can blow them out for me.
Okay, Anna, you're the
I'm
blower.
delegating Anna to blow
And
out the
Isaac looks
candle.
like he's ready to help too.
You ready?
Ready?
Isaac's gonna help
Make a
too.
wish.
Wait a minute, you gotta make a wish
But there's
first.
one requirement and it's no spit.
No spit.
Okay.
What's your wish?
Is Grandpa gonna blow?
I made a wish.
No.
It's a big
Make
secret.
a wish, blow him out.
All right.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy birthday to you. And many more. Okay, are you one? Are you two?
Well, I have been asked to say a few words by William. This is his idea, not mine, but I'm happy to oblige if I can, insofar as I can. And I will begin by telling you, my family and friends, a few words first about my father. He was a very remarkable man. He spent his boyhood in Russia. They were a German family living in the Ukraine, and when the First World War broke out, the whole family was shipped out some distance to Siberia, a Siberian village. The men went first. A couple of months later, women and children followed. They were shipped out in cattle cars. So that was the beginning of a period for my father and his family of being displaced persons. Following the end of World War I came the Russian Revolution, and during the revolution my father's family made their way back west, but they didn't go to the Ukraine. They went to Moscow. This was a long journey, and there were many hardships and many differences. At one point, my grandfather worked in a slaughterhouse. In Moscow, he worked as a railroad porter. He was by trade a cabinet maker, and he had become a carpenter out of necessity. From Moscow, where, by the way, they all came down with some sort of disease, and my father caught typhus, they went up to what was in those days Danzig, the free city of Danzig, but today Polish Gdansk, and from there they caught ship to America, landing in Ellis Island, and from there they went to southern New Jersey, where my grandfather had a job building huts for migrant laborers in a large commercial farm. So my father had that in his childhood, but they weren't in America very long before grandfather died of blood poisoning. He caught a splinter in his thumb. There were no effective cures for blood poisoning at that time, and he died within just a few days. So my father's first job as an adolescent boy was to carry pails of drinking water to field hands. And if you've carried a pail of water lately, you know that was quite a job. He went eventually, still a teenager, into the neighboring town, Bridgeton, which is my native hometown, southern New Jersey, and worked first for a week in a glass house, but he hated the sterility of it and the routine. And after that, he found a place in a local bakery where he took to it nicely. My father taught himself the entire baking trade simply by observation and participation, even to the extent of learning how to decorate those fancy wedding cakes. And when he had learned everything, he persuaded his 3 surviving brothers to open up a bakery, and that's what he became. My father became the owner of a prospering neighborhood bakery. It took a while to get to the level of prosperity, and he was very brave about that. So I have great admiration for my father. He was also a generous man. He was by temperament passionate, and that has passed on to me. I have my moments of passion. But he was a generous, kindly man, never had the opportunity to go even to high school, but he was nonetheless intelligent and discerning, and his feelings were very sensitive. He saw deeply into people, and he was always honest in his point of view. I will also say a few words about my mother, but I preface this by saying, in my opinion, both my parents were very exceptional people. My mother died young, at age 33, and I was at that time 13 years old. She herself had been early an orphan. At least by the age of 10, she was an orphan and was brought up by a reluctant aunt, Aunt Rhoda, who took her in and took also one of her younger brothers in, after she lost her parents. During the time she lived with Aunt Rhoda, she caught, as an adolescent girl, she caught a very severe case of scarlet fever, not rheumatic, but scarlet fever, which, however, badly damaged her heart. As a high school girl, she had participated in sports. She loved girls' basketball, for instance, and she was a smart woman. My mother was the class valedictorian, I think, of a probably small high school, and I think in North Carolina. I'm not even sure of that. She also won the class beauty prize, as they called it, and deservedly. She was a very good-looking woman. So my mother had advantages and qualities, but the terrible disadvantage of a badly damaged heart, which gave her periodic spells during which she had to take to her bed. She would vomit for relief. I never understood why. And I'm sure that this was not a simple condition. But from time to time, she would get these spells. However, they did not prevent her from being, in every other respect, a normal woman, except that she had to take some things slow. She did all her own housework, all the cooking and so forth, and she was a very good mother from the viewpoint of how to bring up a child, speaking with her children, that sort of thing. However, it is my belief, based on plenty of experience, that she was worked on by our pastor, our Lutheran pastor, who was, in my estimation, a foolish, ignorant, meddling man. He did not even interpret the Lutheran doctrine correctly, as I learned myself when I finally got to a Lutheran seminary as a young man. But he was working on my mother, and I think the line must have gone like this, because I have heard this line elsewhere in that same church. The Lord has given you, He is testing your faith. We don't know why. He has allowed you to have this condition, Ms. Werner. But it would be a good idea for you to dedicate your young son to the ministry. He's a bright fellow and he's well behaved. He would make a very good minister. And so she began to work on me in that respect at quite an early age. When she finally did die of a prolonged spell lasting 19 days, this was in June of 1945, she renewed my promise about the ministry on her deathbed. I promised that I would go through with it. And so that same fall, 1945, August or September, I went away to school as a junior seminarian. The period of training lasted for 11 years, 10 years of schooling and 1 year of internship. I had never myself wished to be a minister, but as I made this promise, which became for me a sacred promise, I nonetheless carried it through. My father, as I say, was a discerning man, and he saw through the situation at an early time. He tried to persuade me to quit that school, to be a surgeon, to be an architect, to be a lawyer, and promised his full support, but I could not bring myself to break that promise. The good thing that came out of the schooling, I went to a school in Bronxville, New York for 6 years, 4 years of prep school, 2 years of junior college, is that in junior college, I met my future wife, Connie Diehl. And I could not have done better in the way of wife. She turned out to be a perfect match for me, and a very good, loving, supportive wife. From Bronxville, I went off to Concordia Seminary, again, keeping to my mother's promise. However, I had begun to think for myself, and I had begun to question some of the doctrines we were taught. At the end of 4 years in seminary, I informed my faculty advisor that I could not accept the verbal inspiration of the Bible. I think he did not either, but he did not have courage enough to admit it openly, because conservatives, so-called, were in charge of the school administration, and his own job security would have been jeopardized had he admitted his point of view. I also refused to make a so-called unconditional subscription to the Lutheran Confessions. These are documents written in controversy during the 16th century, and what I objected to was the word unconditional. But then finally and thirdly, and this was probably the deadly stroke, I regarded the Lutheran sacrament as symbolical. The bread of communion represents the body of Christ, but it is not, in some miraculous way, actually the body of Christ, and the blood represents his blood. The Lutherans would not accept this point of view. They insisted that although bread and wine were present, the true body and the true blood of Christ was also present in the sacrament. And for this reason, after all this training, and I had a very satisfactory student record, after all this training, I was refused the decency and dignity of graduation, and my theological diploma was withheld. I never received it. However, still carrying out my promise to my mother, I sought out membership in a different Lutheran church, in a different Lutheran synod in Pennsylvania. I was ordained that same summer, 1956, and for a few years I became a Lutheran pastor. I was not able to stay the whole time. In that sense, I had to break my promise to my mother, and that had to be done with a certain amount of distress, and I don't know quite the word to use, almost a kind of spiritual or emotional violence. But I did break it in the long run because in some respects it had begun to suffocate me. The best thing I got out of my Lutheran education, that education was lacking in many ways, but it was a good discipline. And it was, indoctrination does train the mind to be critical in its thinking. Those are advantages. And you do get the advantage of a deep traditional sense. Tradition is often underestimated by modern liberal people, but when you know something about the traditions, what you find is that modern liberal people, sometimes very clever people, are often also very shallow and sometimes enormously confused. But the best thing I got out of my education was meeting Connie at Concordia in Bronxville. It was a pretty little school, a pretty little college with attractive buildings, an attractive small campus, and we who had gone through the prep school, and all-male prep school, had our first opportunity at the girls when we got into junior college. And although I dated one or two others for a while and was attracted here or there in a sort of miscellaneous way, I began to date Connie sometime later in my first year. She was a very quiet young woman, but at the same time full of energy and quite popular with other girls. She was also an active person, and one of the amusing things about Connie is that she went out for, well, I don't know what to call it. It wasn't exactly the cheerleading squad, but she became a twirler. in the little parades they would put on, the little processions. She would be a twirler with a short skirt, high stepping, and twirling her baton, and she did that very well. But she was also a crack student. Connie was, from top to bottom, a Dean's List student, and she was inclined to scientific interests. She took a genuine interest in some of the scientific subjects. In fact, she told me once that in high school she had wanted to study physics, and the faculty advisor had turned her away from physics, saying that that's not something that girls should study. So she was always disappointed in that. And of course, that was one specimen of innumerable specimens of academic stupidity that works to the disadvantage of pupils. America is loaded with that kind of stupidity. So there comes my passion out. But Connie was popular in school, and one of the interesting things about her in college is that when she became a second-year student, the younger girls were attracted to her, and they often liked to talk over their problems with Connie. She had that ability to draw confidence out of younger people who were looking for help and advice. But she made a very good girlfriend, and I was surprised that in the long run, I was rather surprised, or in retrospect, that she actually chose me among her suitors, because one of the athletes, one of the basketball players on the school varsity, who was also the editor of the school yearbook and was a year older than me, was attracted to her and dated her. Another person, an older man, who was very musical and quite gifted, and what was his specialty? His athletic specialty was that he was a good tennis player, and Connie loved to play tennis. She was athletic. She played girls basketball, taped her glasses to her face because she couldn't do anything without her glasses, and she had wonderful wavy hair. Her natural wave was simply beautiful, and but he was after her and the other fellow, but she chose me, and I didn't play basketball and I couldn't play tennis. But it was my brain or whatever, I don't know what. We were faithful to one another throughout school because we were separated during my years at seminary. She went to Geisinger Hospital in Danville, Pennsylvania, very good. And today it's quite an institution, Geisinger Hospital in Danville, Pennsylvania. That's where she trained for 3 years. Connie's qualities derived in part, I think, from her mother, in that her mother was just an unbelievable woman. Very, very energetic, hardworking, stayed up to all hours working one thing or another for the sake of her children, because Connie's father died of cancer when he was in his mid-40s, and Mrs. Diehl took over and raised a family of 4 children. She did a beautiful job of it, and she was very capable. She could cook, she could sew, she could do anything. And she went from one job to another and saw to it that Connie and her children went through school. I was very eager to marry Connie at one point, and I wanted to get married, and why bother with nursing? But her mother insisted that she should go through with the nurse's training, and of course her mother was entirely right. The fact that Connie became a nurse was a lifesaver for our whole family. We did marry, however, with my father's help, of course, financially, before I was done with seminary. We were 22 years old, and I had a year's internship, which we called vicarage, during which I served a small congregation in Seneca Falls, New York, and then a final year, a 4th year at seminary at St. Louis. We lived in an apartment downtown, and Connie had our first baby during my year of internship, because she became pregnant right away. 10 months after our marriage, she delivered Helen. And then in another 10 months, Shirley came along. We wouldn't have sent either one of them back, but this was quite a burden to impose on a young woman, and I didn't have a sufficient appreciation of quite what a burden it was. Although I think at that point we did realize we perhaps had better practice birth control. Those Lutherans were undecided about birth control. That's another foolishness. There were people in that church who thought, let God do it. Let God make these decisions. Well, God made a couple of really quickies in our case, but we had two wonderful children to start off our family with. At any rate, so Connie was with me and helping me already in the last years of my education. I could say so much about her, but it would be pointless to go on and on. She was in every respect a wonderful woman, and I just wish to say one last thing about her qualities, aside from her sensitivity exceptional and her intelligence very high. In the last part of her life, suffering this dreadful disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease, the quality that shined in her for me over and over, and which I could not possibly overlook and cannot forget, is the quality of her nobility. She had nobility. I loved her.